Hi everyone, this is William. Just a heads up, this episode does have some brief language around the half-hour mark, in case you're listening with others present. Thank you, and now, on with the episode. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Therapy by the Book, the show where we take your favorite fictional characters and ask the question, what would it be like if they came to therapy? My name is William Haddad, and joining me on today's episode is my very good friend, Daniel Villanueva. Daniel is a bilingual licensed marriage and family therapist who specializes in culturally competent care. He's also a certified clinical supervisor, sex therapist, and trauma-informed care clinician, not to mention a background in teaching as an adjunct professor. All this is to say, Daniel brings a wealth of expertise to his work with individuals, couples, families, and it is a pleasure to have you on the show today, Daniel.
Oh,
Welcome.
man, I appreciate it. I appreciate that you even have me on here. I think it's so much fun, and I love the fact that I was able to see it as an idea, and then now be part of it as it finally just opens up and runs.
You were one of the first people I told about this show as when I had the idea and I was starting to kind of put the early stages into it. So it's been really cool to sort of share this experience and the various steps as I laid the foundations to make these episodes happen.
Oh, it's an amazing concept if you really think about it, because we do it all the time. Whether you're in mental health or not mental health, you start looking at these characters, in our favorite movies or books or whatever it might be, especially the villains, for me anyway. And you start picking them apart. You start wondering what happened to them. And some of these authors, Tolkien, even Rollins, I guess, have done a really good job of giving you a real thick and a really good backstory. You understand the characters and where they came from, and their grandchildren and children and everything else in between.
They have. It always strikes me, authors like Charles Dickens is another good
Yeah.
example that comes to mind, how what a deep inherent understanding of human nature so many of these storytellers had, that they're able to write these characters who, as a therapist, I mean, it's, you see the connections, but it doesn't really take a lot of effort, if I'm being honest. For, once you know what you're looking for, it just reveals itself plain as day. And it's extraordinary to me how much more human, even as you say, even the villains become when you look at them through this lens.
Exactly. Yeah, I've actually worked with a couple writers in the past, and one of them told me something interesting that always stood out to me, and I've kind of put it in my back pocket ever since then. It's this idea that he says, I'm a writer, but I'm also a psychologist. I'm also a doctor. I'm also anthropologist. They go through and I guess I could say you, because you like to write as well. Um, you go through all these different formats and all these different sciences to really formulate your characters and really get a rich understanding of what you want to present, what you want to put out there, and really the person or creature or whatever it is that you're creating, just to bring it to life. And I always thought that was pretty fascinating and something I never really thought about.
And sort of putting on the hat, putting on the persona of different characters, even when you're not really incorporating, at least consciously, the psychological aspect into your character process. I found this, at least, to be the case with my stories. It's still immersive and almost like speaking another language, because it's a form of role playing, I guess, is how I sort of look at it.
Right.
Pretending to talk in their voices, or pretending to think about, what kind of events in this character's past would make them feel this way about plot point X in the story.
How do you see your characters? I tend to think, I guess, fortunately and unfortunately, TV raised me, so I tend to I tend to see things in movie or TV. I tend to see the characters and the traumas act out, and how they might have felt, and seeing the little boy or the little girl in this adult, and seeing how they might have reacted to their parent doing whatever they did, or family members. How do you see that yourself?
Yeah, I guess for me, it's, and I I mean, I speak movie quote as like a second
me too.
dialect at this point,
Right.
so it's hard to, it is kind of hard to separate the two sometimes. But I see my characters in the sense that I always look at them as being the sum of their past, and that's an approach I
Mm.
take with a lot of clients too. I ask myself you know what happened, or not even what happened to this character, really, just what is this character's life story? What is their biography,
Yeah.
as full as it, um, such as it is, up to this point in time when the primary narrative of the story takes place? Because I feel like if I know that, then I know intuitively, and I really do want to stress intuitively, what the character would say at any given point in the story itself. And for me, that makes writing dialogue a lot easier, because then it just feels more natural. I feel like I'm able to trust my instincts when I'm just sort of going into the zone and typing whatever comes to mind when two characters are having a conversation. And I have found, at least so far, that it's created the need for a lot less editing and rewriting when I'm going back over later drafts, which is very nice.
Yeah, no, I mean that completely makes sense. You put the pieces of the puzzle together, and that's why you're so good at therapy as well. You can put the pieces of the puzzle together, and it's we work in patterns, right? I think I've always talked to you about it that way, or at least that's how I see it. We work in patterns. We see patterns, and through those patterns, we connect intrinsic connections to past experiences, why they're doing what they're doing.
What would you say is one of the most common patterns that you've seen, either in the stories you read that resonate with you as a writer or storyteller yourself, or with clients and the people that you've worked with in your career?
Avoidance, self-preservation, aggressiveness, irritability, um, just trying to do anything in order to avoid pain, but while sitting in suffering by choice, because they see suffering as something that they've lived their whole life, so they're used to it. It's part of their routine. Um, but pain is so unknown and terrifying, that they don't want to give it a chance. And it's not until they sit in pain that they realize that they've been suffering for no reason, and that's when we get them out. It's almost like I've been using this off and on for forever, and I don't even know if you know this show, but it was an old show with Andy Griffith show.
Oh, sure.
And yeah, and so Aunt May would come and she'd bring a pie or whatever, and the guy in the jail would let himself out, get a piece of pie, eat, talk with everybody there, and then go back in and lock himself back up. And people, or I'm going to say children of trauma, like all of us are at some point, we tend to live our lives in that way until we have that aha moment. We realize, oh wait, what am I doing? I'm the one locking the door. It's open. I can leave whenever I want, but I'm choosing to stay here because it's safe. I understand it. I can deal with this. But the unknown, the ability to trust ourselves and be vulnerable, is terrifying.
The phrase that comes to my mind is learned helplessness, hearing you describe that state of living. Um,
Absolutely.
I regret to say that our character client for this episode is not the man from the Andy Griffith show, unfortunately. But you have my attention now. I'm thinking like
Yeah.
I need to add him for a future referral. But I am glad you I am glad you brought up avoidance, though, because that, I think, actually has a very big part to play in the mentality of the character client we do have for today's episode. Today's referral is from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. He's a man of many, many roles in his life. He's been an ambassador, he's been a general, he's been a negotiator, but he's probably best known for being a Jedi Knight, and his name is Obi-Wan Kenobi from Star Wars.
When you first brought it up to me, I thought, um, I don't even know how to say that. It's almost as if the first thing I thought is it's a good person. He's okay. What problems can he have? And it wasn't until I really sat down and got out of my own biased line of sight, I guess, my own biased perspective, that I realized that there's a lot of darkness, a lot of pain, a lot of struggle. I immediately went to PTSD for myself, just based on the criteria, based on his adventures, and then I started dissecting back from there to try to meet, all the different little sections of criteria, and get an idea of where it might have started. And I don't know him as a child. That would be interesting. I didn't do enough research to find anything on that, but I do know, in his whatever he might have been when he was with Anakin in his 20s, or maybe even 30s, I don't know. That's when we saw shifts start to happen. That's when we saw him coming to an understanding that there is darkness, and that he can't control everything. I think he had a false sense of control at some point.
What do you think was the turning point that first tested or even broke that illusion of control that he'd been harboring as a young Jedi?
Losing his mentor was probably a big deal, obviously. I think, what was his name?
Qui-Gon Jinn.
There you go. That when he lost him, I think he started to. What was that after Anakin's turn? I can't remember. I don't. Sorry if there's any huge Star Wars fans. I'm going to butcher this like crazy, but
it's okay. I'll take the flack. No worries.
Okay, yeah. Whatever the order was in, but his mentor, him losing his mentor, was one of the first things that came to mind. And I did a little bit of research, and then of course Anakin starting to separate himself, and feeling as if what he was getting fed was manipulative and controlling, and that there was more out there that he can do, like another false sense of control. And I think that started to mess with his with Obi-Wan's ability to understand what he would think was logical. Step 1, step 2, step 3, and they weren't falling into place. And then when Anakin went off the rails with what I forgot, it was like Order 66.
Yeah, that was Anakin's darkest first true act of darkness and total corruption, when he's pledged himself to the dark side at that point. But I think that you're right. Even well before that, Obi-Wan's already wrestling with something of an identity crisis, as a Jedi. It's subtle, because on Obi-Wan is very, very good at concealing his emotions in a way that Anakin never is. And on top of that, Anakin is likewise wrestling with his own identity crisis as a Jedi, but it's of a very different nature than Obi-Wan's. However, Anakin, I think, tends to be someone who acts out a lot more and is much, much less subtle with expressing his frustration and his own emotional suffering. So it's easy to miss Obi-Wan's, but I think where it begins is both the loss of control when his mentor, when Qui-Gon is brutally stabbed by Darth Maul right in front of his eyes.
Right.
And then he's the one who's left to look after Anakin, who Qui-Gon had already made very clear was going to be trained, and he was intending to do it. So now Obi-Wan, not only has to deal with the death of his mentor, who's been his everything, but now has to live up to his mentor's last wish. His dying words are, Obi-Wan, you're going to have to train him now.
Yeah, it's on you now. And also go against the word of other people that he respected and looked up to. I mean, we have Yoda and everybody else that are saying, I don't know about this kid. They didn't even, well, he saw something in him. I think and using our, I guess, presentness, he saw the trauma in him. He saw that this kid was carrying around a lot of baggage. There was a lot of pain. There was a lot of rebellion. There was a lot of selfishness, things that he could grow out of, that he could have been mature about, and guided in the right way, but he wasn't, and that was one of the weird subtle takeaways that I got, is that they worked on everything but his mental health, which sounds odd to say, but it's true. It was very meditative. There was a lot of I don't even know what it's called, but there was a lot of Yoda talk. There was a lot of indirect statements, and but there was nobody really ever sat him down and at least from what I saw, and helped him really deal with this loss. And this, I mean, he left his mom.
Yeah, it speaks to, I think, one of the unspoken flaws of the Jedi Order as it existed in the time of the Republic, which was that it was about it was dedicated to a philosophy of selflessness, of
Yes.
emotionless doctrine and faith and loyalty to the common good, and that's all well and good. But I think what the Jedi, and to preface this, for the most part, it was never an issue prior to Anakin, because the Jedi typically only trained infants who were,
Mm.
thought to have high force abilities. So the issue um, I guess you would say, complex trauma that had had a little bit of time to fester or go unresolved, was never really something that came up that often. So the Jedi never had to learn how to deal with it properly. So when you get Anakin, when Obi-Wan, I should say, gets Anakin, he's not neither he nor Yoda is going to know, is going to be in a position to address Anakin's deeper emotional problems and acknowledge them, as you say, for what they are. Sit him down and actually tell him the way things are, which, for anybody who understands trauma, is just a recipe for disaster. If you tell somebody who's traumatized, you need to stop feeling altogether.
Yeah, right. No, exactly. It's like they helped him uh, in avoidant behavior. They helped him try to compartmentalize his pain and shove it down deep like everybody does. And it wasn't till Palpatine, used it to his advantage, and brought it into the light, but in a negative way. He used it as a weapon versus what we do is
Exactly.
change the meaning of it. It could have been uh, strength. It could have been resiliency. It could have been a way to teach him how to live this incredible life. It's interesting that we're and my I kept doing this, and I'll explain what I'm talking about. I kept going to Anakin, no matter how much I researched or read, and I tried not to. I didn't want to come in here and be like I'm reading a book. So I tried to, just kind of look, but not memorize, and just go with my gut and my heart, and see where it goes. But dude, I kept going to Anakin every time, and we're doing it now. It's interesting that we keep going there.
I mean, when I think about it, Obi-Wan's PTSD, Obi-Wan's trauma, is directly tied to Anakin more than anything else. Even the trauma that he has from Qui-Gon's death, Anakin is a factor in that trauma, because Anakin becomes the crux of what creates the pressure for Obi-Wan to have to push aside his grief and live up to Qui-Gon's legacy through Anakin. On top of that, this is what I've always found interesting. Anakin and Qui-Gon are very similar in that, like Anakin, Qui-Gon was one of the few Jedi who very much had, shall we say, a reckless streak, and was known for
Yes.
independence, was known for kind of pushing the rules a little bit. And Obi-Wan was constantly trying to play the moderator, the sensible one, and talk him down. And it wasn't until Qui-Gon was dead that Obi-Wan finally did a heel turn and, basically says to Yoda, I will openly defy the council if I can live up to Qui-Gon's wishes. So Anakin is, in a way, Anakin is exerting unintentionally exerting, I think, Qui-Gon's influence over Obi-Wan. But the irony is that although you could say that Qui-Gon was in many respects the father Anakin never had and perhaps should have had, Obi-Wan is much more of an older brother figure.
Yes.
So he could never be that same level of care. But that doesn't mean that he wasn't capable of forming a bond with Anakin. And indeed he does. That I think really where their trauma, their mutual trauma comes into play is the connection they forge during the Clone Wars as brothers on the battlefield, comrades in arms, and then to have that so horribly, suddenly, and irretrievably shattered by the Sith.
Absolutely, and you could see the competition. You could see them, or let me take that back. I could see Anakin really trying to almost kind of impress his big brother, almost try to show him that he's not a little kid, that he's not the little boy that Obi-Wan had known his, I guess Anakin's almost his whole life. There was a different level of maturity that he wanted to attain, and he wanted to make sure that he could showcase it to Obi-Wan, which I think, and this is based off movies for me. It seemed as if Obi-Wan understood it, but he didn't want to indulge it. It almost felt like there was pullback, and in his own what might have come across as arrogant way. I don't think it was trying to be arrogant, but he almost felt like he was patting him on the head, like, okay, I get it. Yeah, you're mature, you're grown up now. But those little seeds, again, are what pushed Anakin to go a different direction. And you see that later, where Obi-Wan starts to, compile all his regrets and traumas, and how he starts to understand or think, anyways, that it was all his fault, that all these, children and all these people died because of his lack of effort, or what he didn't do right, or what he didn't see.
So let's say Obi-Wan is, he's in the office now. You're doing your intake with him, and he's relating a lot of this to you, and he's expressing to you that in his reflections, years after the events themselves played out, he's come to hold himself at fault for everything that happened. What do you say to him as his therapist?
Well, it depends. It depends on how far in we are. It depends on how much of his history I understand, because I need to know why he would internalize this, why he would try to control it. What is his trauma response to where he feels that he needs to be in control, and that he can control the thoughts and behaviors of others, and other than the Force. I would try to understand the whys, and then I would start to just kind of explore it with him, and explore where Anakin, his mentor, where all of them created their own destiny, where they learned what they learned, and how they behave in a way that's formulated by their own experiences, and the meaning that they give their actions and behaviors and everything else, so that we can have those aha moments externally, so Obi-Wan can see why they're doing the things they do, and a lot of them aren't going to make sense, and that's what I want. I want them not to make sense. I want him to have those moments where he thinks it's ridiculous. Why would he do that? Why would this pain cause him to do this? And then we can re-relate it to him. We can show him how his expectations of Anakin, or any of these people, might be a little bit incongruent, because they're not matching, just like they don't match where Qui-Gon did what he did based on his experiences, where Anakin did what he did based on his experience. And then we can start severing those intrinsic connections. We can bring them back to the here and now, because he's living in the past, man. The past is depression, the future is anxiety. The only thing that's real is here, this moment, right now. So if we can, that's not to say, and just for any of your audiences listening, it's not to say that we don't go to the past, or don't think about the past, or we don't go to the future. It's important. But we don't stay there. We need to go to the past, take a look. What do we get from it? What do we learn from it? And then we gather that information and discard whatever's unnecessary at the moment, and then come back here. Or we go to the future and see what our hopes and dreams are, reassess and see the pitfalls and the possible issues that we might have, and then we come back here, and now we're prepared, but we're not scared. It's something that I stole from somebody a long time ago. We're curious, not furious. You know.
Oh, I like that.
We're trying to figure out why.
You know, as a Jedi, I feel that Obi-Wan would have a lot of practice in meditation and in, you know, reflecting on events that have transpired. But the big difference that I'm hearing you're talking about that you would be doing with him in therapy is you're teaching him to add emotional acknowledgement and
Yes.
reflection into that process. So how would that, what might that look like, you know, for you as a clinician if you're helping an individual who has lots of experience when it comes to meditative contemplation, when it comes to reflective and even, you know, critical self-reflection, but has never gone the full measure of allowing themselves to actually feel and call the emotions for what they are into the mix?
For me, I walk them through it. I walk through it with them, asking them a lot of questions, man. And me personally, I sometimes almost kind of deviate from, you have a keyboard behind you, so they want to talk about the keyboard, and sure, well, I'll yeah, black and white keys, pretty cool. But what about that painting? What about that map? What's going on with the map? What is that? And so what I'm trying to do is they're so concentrated on this trauma, on this, again, depression past, that they're trying to fix. They're trying to understand why the puzzle pieces don't fit. So if I can take them to a different place, which is still within the room, that map behind you is in the room, then we can start having these clear conversations, and then we can start creating connections to why the keyboard is there, why the map is there, why the whatever that is to your left is there, and those intrinsic connections, those interconnections of everything, because as you know, everything is interconnected. Everything. There is no this or that. Everything and anything is interconnected and all has a meaning. Then we can understand it, and then we can change its meaning. Because that's at the core of it. Nothing is innately bad or good. It's just it's the meaning that we give it that makes all the difference.
In a sense, it's sort of the missing piece of why there's always this conflict between the Sith and the Jedi. You know, both use the Force, yet the Force is neutral. The Force is universal and all-encompassing, and it's only the Sith and the Jedi who give the Force its bias, its morality, if you will. So in a sense, you know, I think what treatment with Obi-Wan would look like, it would be asking him to reevaluate eventually some of his fundamental beliefs about why he has used the Force the way he has, and what it really means to see the Force, to feel it, and to understand how the fabric of the galaxy is made the way it is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The hard part for me, and again, I'm making assumptions, right? And not because it's a fictional character, but just an assumption based on the person that I let's pretend that I know. He's smart. He's very intelligent, and he's also manipulative in his own way. And he prides himself on being, 2 steps ahead. So I'm not gonna go directly to the key. I'm gonna use the keyboard because it's easy and it's right there. I'm not gonna go straight to the keyboard. I'm just not, because he's gonna expect me to, and he's already 4 steps ahead of how he's gonna counter anything that I'm gonna tell him, and whatever it might be. So I'm gonna talk to him about the map. I really am. And I'm gonna talk to him about his sweater, and then I'm gonna talk to him about the weather, and I'm gonna talk to him about the different weather systems and what planets are nicer. And what I'm trying to do is it's unfortunately, and not that we're all this calculated. So I hope your listeners aren't thinking bad of us, but it is calculated. I'm asking specific questions for a specific reason. I'm trying to get an understanding. Does he actually think that there is no hope? Is he actually hopeless, or is he just feeling helpless? Does he actually feel that there is no light, or does he feel he's in a gray area because of what has happened? Does he actually feel responsible, or is he just punishing himself because he feels, and based on his own patterns, his own life experience, that he has to punish himself in order to get a result? And you see this a lot with, in our dimension and world, we see this with kids where they fail a test or something, they get in trouble, and then all of a sudden, do we cuss on this? Sometimes I cuss, and I'm trying really hard not to, man.
No, you're good. You're good.
So you fail a test, and these kids, they'll beat the shit out of themselves. They'll be really hard on themselves, and then they'll study really hard, and they'll call themselves names, and they're just horrible with themselves. And then all of a sudden, guess what? Oh my God, you get an A, and this happens more than once. And then now we have a new pattern. Now we have an understanding that if I beat the crap out of myself, I will do well. And so I don't know for Obi-Wan. I don't know his childhood. I don't know his life experience. I don't know how his dad handled frustrations. I don't know how his uncle, grandpa, I don't know where his family, where they came from, where they ended up moving to or migrated. And I don't know their history, but I do know trauma. I know it well enough to understand that this is a pattern that he's picked up. He has created an understanding for himself that if he's hard on himself, he can avoid pain, and he can avoid failure. He can avoid causing more problems. Maybe creating another Anakin with Luke because he refuses to teach Luke. Combining the two ideas, our scheme of the world, you see that in children, where they'll do that to themselves, and then now as adults they'll still do it to themselves, and they're horrible with themselves. That is what Obi-Wan does to himself as well. And I mean, I guess it's kind of a joke, but if you look at the movies, man, his trauma really got him, because he aged a hell of a lot from that from the one movie to the older ones. Yeah,
this is true. It's a lot for just 19 years, which is the approximate time between episodes 3 and 4. So yeah, it's funny, and but it's also sad and true. That the physical stress, the somatic toll that trauma takes on the body can absolutely cause that outward wear and tear.
Yeah, you see it with him, and that I had that in my head, and I wasn't going to use it because I thought it was kind of corny, but it's true. You get the difference is incredible, and of course they're different actors, but if you use it as this is reality, which we're kind of trying to do, it aged him. It aged him a lot.
To put it in a more of a clinical perspective, it's I would say we're meeting the client where he's at, and if this is what he looks like, and this is what he became in 19 years, well, then that's where I'm going to base my therapeutic approach off of, and do my best to connect with him.
Yeah, and we're also going to explore other stuff, right? What has he been doing, and where was he? Tatooine.
Yeah, Tatooine.
What was he doing? Watching Luke grow up, and was there alcoholism? Was there
what's his coping?
Exactly.
And if he's watching Luke, then why does he never interact with Luke directly? Why is he so set on being this silent, almost invisible guardian of sorts, who doesn't, I think Luke has had, all but 2 interactions with him prior to their meeting in episode 4.
Yeah, old Ben. It was
Old
old Ben
Ben.
from, yeah.
A strange old hermit is Luke's, description of the man.
Exactly, and that, I mean, that connects directly with what I was saying, is this idea that he didn't he has punished himself so much that his perspective is, and the meaning of his behaviors is, if I interact or I get involved, if I teach this kid the way of the Jedi, then I'm just going to fail again, and I'm going to create another monster. And also, I mean, they're related. It's his son. So what are the ramifications of that? What's the idea that this might go in that way? And he can't handle the trauma. He's already, again, that's what we talked about. He's going into the future, and staying there. He didn't come back. It wasn't until he confronted, well, I guess not confronted, but stood in the way of Vader, and finally transcended, that he realized, no, what have I been doing?
We've talked a lot about avoidance this episode, and it is, I think, worth pointing out that it is only at the end Obi-Wan has that moment where he stops avoiding and he stops fighting, he stops resisting, and it's that just pure moment of acceptance that he lets
Yes.
go and he gives himself up to that uncertainty and to that reality. And when he does that, suddenly Vader's lightsaber doesn't even hurt him. Does just goes straight through him. He's gone before the lightsaber even comes into contact with his robe.
Because he's finally present. It's interesting to see that play out, that manifestation of complete presence. And we've been talking a lot about this idea of meditation, and how the writer, or director, how he created these films. And I think there's always this undertone, whether it be, I don't know, this Joseph Campbell-y perspective of the hero's journey, or the whole philosophy of being here, being present, and being so connected with self, and the source, whatever that might be, that we can transcend this, this meat bag, that we walk around all day. And that's what he said, you're going to kill me, but I'm going to live forever.
All right, I'm going to be more powerful than you can imagine. And
Yes.
it's both it's both a statement, but also in kind of, I think on some level, a bit of a final push, a final prod, not really a lesson, because they're no longer the student pupil, the teacher pupil duo that they were, but sort of a more of a casual, like, life lesson, recommendation from one old soldier to another. Hey, I just realized now how I've been hurting myself all this time, and I'm gone, I'm out, but I can see you're still down here. You need to do that too. I'll be waiting for you, but until you do, you're not going to be able to touch me.
I wonder, because when I thought of it, I thought, because I always, well, we always see things in so many different perspectives. One of the other perspectives was, I wonder if it was another lesson. I wonder if he was, because remember, he didn't want to kill him to begin with. When he turned him into a burnt,
You're right, on their
corpse,
duel in
basically.
Mustafar.
Yeah.
Yeah, he left him
Yeah.
there, although he might as well have been dead if Palpatine hadn't showed up when he did. It wasn't Obi-Wan was not going to murder him, to end his life.
And he
Couldn't
didn't
do
finish
that.
him off, which was interesting to me, that he let him to suffer. But I think that was his own avoidance of pain. But now, so he did that, and then now we have this conversation, which I should have watched that stupid movie just right before this, or something, so I can remember that specific that dialogue. You'll have to splice that in somehow or something to get it.
You're talking about the exchange in episode 4?
Yes. When Darth Vader and him are talking, and like you just said, that I'm gonna be more powerful than I ever have been. But I wonder if he wanted him to kill him so he can understand that this doesn't matter. What you're doing right now doesn't matter, and that you're seeking this everlasting power, at your own deficit. And this goes back to where I started, where it's this idea of pain versus suffering.
Mm-hmm.
He's choosing suffering. He's suffering when he can sit in the pain of losing, what was her name?
Padme.
Yes, when losing her, and himself and his mom that was killed, and everybody else in his life.
He's been stewing in that for,
oh my gosh,
literally in his suit, this prison
yes.
of trauma, and I mean, that's
yes.
Anakin Vader is a whole other episode, but yeah,
Oh, for sure.
Obi-Wan, I think, is both. He's both. Because Obi-Wan's gonna Obi-Wan, he's both.
Right.
He's both stroking his own ego a little bit by saying, "I finally figured it out. I'm one step ahead of you as always." But he's also, I think, really trying in his own way to show a last bit of compassion to the man he once knew when he says, "You can't win, Darth. You strike me down, I'm going to become more powerful than you can possibly imagine."
Right. And yeah, I completely thought the same thing, that there was another layer there that was trying to be shown to the watcher, reader, however you consumed it, that he still cared about him, that he was still trying to teach, that he was still trying to be almost kind of rectify his mistakes. Although I was hoping to for it to end, at least in my head, as not redemption, but a letting go of the past and letting go of the future, and being completely present. But there's still a piece where he was trying to teach. He was trying to show that no, I didn't make that mistake, which pushes me to think that maybe he didn't let it all go, but none of us are perfect.
Well, in a way,
so
that's
sense.
Yeah. It's sort of the final. It's sort of a combination of the two. I feel it's because it's it was avoidance for what he struggled with and suffered with, was traumatized by for so long. Then it was attempt at redemption when he did take Luke under his wing and start to teach him the Force, and then to help them escape from the Death Star. But ultimately, he realizes somewhere along that way that this is never going to be about him righting the wrongs of the past, because the past is unchangeable. And so it's in the last exchange that's that we've been talking about, I think he's both letting go of the past, and at the same time, because he is only human, he's admitting as much by giving that final little act of compassion, that little hope, that echo of redemption and wanting redemption for Vader in his own way there.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was his moment that he finally figured it out. That was his aha moment. And those are great, man.
They are.
Those are so
We
incredible.
live for those as therapists.
Yes.
So let me tell you.
Yes. When somebody has that, you can see it on their face. Sometimes they won't say anything. Sometimes they won't acknowledge it, and I tend to let them go wherever they're going to go. But you can see it on their face that they have that aha moment, like, oh, I get it now. I get it, and that's all you need. Whatever you do with it, you're going to do with it, because we're creatures of pattern, like we talked about before. So sometimes we'll go back into the pattern, or sometimes we'll change patterns, and we'll go into a much more positive direction, which is, I guess ideally where he went.
But it took that aha moment for him to realize that there was that greater perspective available to begin with. I mean, we're all looking for our next aha moment, with each obstacle that we face.
Yeah.
One last question before we close out for today, Daniel.
Oh, that was too quick, man.
I know, right? You're telling me. But if there's someone listening to this episode who's thinking about going to therapy but has never done it before, or maybe it's just been a while, what advice would you give to them?
I would say to, if we're starting from scratch, or not even from scratch, I would say to talk to people, interview, have a conversation, see if you click, because the relationship is the most important part. You need to feel comfortable. You need to feel like you're with somebody that might understand you, that might be there with you or for you. Second, vulnerability, man. you ideally need to come in and be vulnerable. And vulnerability, people look at it as such a negative thing because we're taught that way, because vulnerability is weakness. But the reality is it's not. It's a superpower if we can use it correctly. Because if we're vulnerable, and as you work with whatever therapist you're going to be with, they'll help you to see that the vulnerability actually makes you, the Teflon Don. The more vulnerable you are, nobody can get to you. Nothing can get to you. Everything just bounces off because you're open. Your shield is down. You're able to be able to say, I appreciate you, or that hurt my feelings, or whatever it might be, without a need for an outcome, without a need to manipulate a situation, by just being here. So relationship, vulnerability, and an understanding that and this is the unfortunate part, well, I take that back. This is the unfortunate but fortunate part, is that at first it feels like it gets worse before it gets better. And with that said, it doesn't mean that it's it destroys you. What it means is that we're going to get you in touch with your feelings, in touch with your emotions, in touch with that little person, whatever that might be, inside of you that learned to shield themselves and bury this pain and this agony, and again I call it suffering, to bury the suffering inside themselves in order to avoid pain. So we're going to bring that to light, and we're going to show you that pain, yeah, it sucks, but it goes away.
Daniel, thank you so much. It's been wonderful having you on the show today.
Oh man, it's a pleasure, dude. Anytime, any person, just throw them at me, and I'll come back, and hopefully you can even change your format. Let's go for hours. There's so many details about this guy that I kept thinking about, and so many ideas, and yeah, I love it. I love what you're doing. I appreciate you so much, and I'm proud of you, which might sound weird, but I really am, and I'm very happy for you, and I hope this blows up, man, and I hope you do so well, and that people get a lot out of it, because it's such a fascinating topic.
That means so much to me, man. Thank you. And I do have a feeling that we'll see Obi-Wan back for another session before too long.
I love it. Yeah.